morning, everybody. I guess we will get started. Thank you for being patient with our October heat wave. Usually by October this room is cooled down some, but clearly that's not been the case. So welcome tonight to first rehearsal for Little Shop of Horrors. And I'll talk a little bit about first rehearsal. In the professional theater, first rehearsal is the time when the acting company gathers for the first time. It is actually the first rehearsal. And at that event, the actors get to see all of the designs that have been rendered for the show, so they learn about the world of the play that they will be acting in. And for us, it's a little bit different because our process, as much as we try to replicate what happens in the professional theater, we just don't have the same kind of time. In our world, first rehearsal, the one that you're here tonight, is in some ways the first time the actors see some of the designs of the show. But our actors begin virtually at the same time our designers begin. And in the professional theater, that's not the case. The designs are done and the designs are in the shops long before the actors begin rehearsal. So that's what first rehearsal is, and we're pleased to have first rehearsal for the Shop of Horrors and to share it with you tonight. And for those of you who have never been here, welcome to Wonder Bread Studio. This is a space that we are enormously proud of. And the history of the space is that for several years, actually beginning with the renovation of Klein Theater about 8 years ago, we began rehearsing our larger shows in empty storefronts in Eagle Village, Park and Shop. And the University Foundation that owns that real estate was very generous in allowing us to have an empty storefront, and it served us very, very well. But as the Eagle Village got more rented and there were fewer large storefronts for us, we were out of luck. But then Hostess and Wonder Bread went bankrupt. The University Foundation bought this parcel of land, which abuts to Eagle Village, and they offered us this building for a rehearsal space, for a large rehearsal space. And it came with a generous offer, but also some requirements. The requirements were we would have to do all of the work to renovate it ourselves, and we would also have to pay a big portion of it because the university wasn't going to put money into the space. So the university gave us one working bathroom, and they put in some working power and a little bit of lighting for us, and everything else we did with our faculty, staff, and students. One very hot weekend in September 4 years ago, we essentially took what was a very, very dark, terrible space, and we turned it into a rehearsal room, and it was an extraordinary transformation. We're actually in the process of working on a photo montage that we're going to put here permanently to show the great transformation. But anyway, it is a tremendous space for us because this deck that you all are on actually allows us to rehearse in a space that is the size of Klein Theater, which is essential for us. And if you look down at this space, you'll see all of this taped marks. This tape is taping out the scenery so the actors can actually have a great sense of the space here. We'll rehearse here until we go into technical rehearsals. We'll have 2 days to space in the theater, and then we'll actually begin technical rehearsals. So having a space like this is tremendous for us because it gives us really a great space to work in, albeit warm sometimes. So if any of you have connections to HVAC shops or large bank accounts, if you would like to air condition this space, we would love to talk to you about it. But we suffer through just because it is a tremendous space for us, and so we love welcoming you to our home here. I'm pleased tonight that we are going to talk about Little Shop of Horrors and introduce to you the world of the play now that you know a little bit more about the play, its place in the canon and musical theater, and the music as well. So tonight I am going to talk with you about the play and our approach to the play. And I'm also very pleased that Michael Benson is here with me tonight. He's behind me. I'm going to light him up. Michael is our new scenic designer on the faculty. He did his graduate work at Penn State. This is his first production that he is designing for us. We're thrilled to have him with us as he sort of learns how we do things and has really jumped into a very, very big project. So Michael's going to talk about the scenic design for the play. And Kevin McCluskey was scheduled to be here to talk about the costume designs for the play. Kevin, for those of you who have heard him speak before, is very excited about it. But last night, Kevin had an emergency appendectomy in our Washington hospital. So Kevin is recovering and is very sad that he can't be here tonight. He has sent his renderings that are posted on the board over there that you can look at, and I am going to channel him tonight, albeit not nearly as well, but I'm going to talk with you about his process and his ideas for Little Shop of Horrors. Other folks who aren't with us tonight, by virtue of just time, it takes quite a world to design and build a play like Little Shop of Horrors. Jason Arnold is returning this year to design lighting for this show. Jason's a professional designer who will be in residence with us and be a guest for this show. Tony Angelini also is returning to us to design sound. Our vocal coach is Helen Housley, who many of you know. Sam Reynolds is our choreographer, who's been our choreographer for musicals for many years. And we're also thrilled that Angie Benson is with us to do the music direction. Angie is... There you are, sorry. Angie's behind. Angie is with us, and this is her first project with us. And Chris talked with you about Angie a couple of weeks ago, and so we're thrilled and we're great. We have the whole Benson family here. Michael's designing the scenery, and Angie is doing music direction, and their son Max, who just sort of keeps us happy as he joins us from time to time. We also have other people, and I would be remiss not to talk about them. We couldn't do our work without Kenny Horning, who's our scene shop supervisor. Kenny is never at these events. He likes to go home at the end of a very long day of managing a lot of projects. Marilyn Wojak, who is our costume shop supervisor, very talented person as well, who clearly now has a lot on her plate with Kevin recovering. Brandon Prendergast is our production consultant. Terrence Snyder, my very patient assistant who finds her days filled with all kinds of exciting things like cleaning the bathrooms at Wonder Bread to dealing with getting things purchased. And of course, John Reynolds is our director of marketing and audience services, who all of you know. And we've been remiss because we've never really introduced the house management staff for Backstage Pass. So the folks who greet you, and be sure that you have coffee and good things to eat. Matt Good, Alexis Tavares, and Ashley DiBenedetto, they're in the back. They arrive early and stay late and are virtually invisible to all of you, but not invisible to us because we couldn't do it without them. We also have more than 24 student employees in the department who actually have paid jobs in the department, working in our shops, our management office, and our box office, who are also very critical to our operation. So, there are a lot of people. Sometimes you see one or two of us, but there are indeed many, many, many more who make this happen. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the show from a director's perspective. Little Shop of Horrors. The role of the director is one that's very much misunderstood, and a lot of people don't really understand what it is that we do. In some instances, you'll go to the theater and you will not really see the work of the director. The director's work will be invisible. The actors will present a play, and they will work on the scenery that's been designed and in the costumes that have been designed. But it's not really evident what the director has done. In some ways, directors often are invisible agents for the truth of the script, the truth of the playwright. And sometimes directors have conceptual ideas that enlarge the truth of the playwright. And when you go see these shows, you know the hand of the director is there. It's often most evident when you go see a classical play, a Shakespeare play, for instance, that's set on the moon. And you know that Romeo and Juliet on the moon is something that's been introduced to hopefully enlarge the truth of the text. In that instance, the director's work is very visible because it's a conceptual idea that propels the truth of the text forward. I often tend to be a director who prefers to defer to the truth of the text and the playwright's words. I'm not often in a situation where I find that a conceptual idea actually enlarges the text. And indeed, that's where we are with Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop of Horrors is a play that really stands on its own, a musical that stands on its own, that doesn't need a large conceptual idea. I don't need to reimagine Skid Row in any particular way. I don't need to reimagine these characters. I don't have to fiddle with the world of the play in order to have the play speak whatever truth it has to speak. And so in some ways, that's the production that you are going to learn more about tonight, and the production that you will actually experience in Klein Theater. It's a play as was imagined first by a movie director, as you already know, and then again by a writer and a lyricist and a composer to make a musical out of that text. And so there's really not a tremendous amount to talk about in terms of our approach to the play. My job is to get to the truth of the text and to work with the actors to perform the truth of the text, and to work also with the designers to build the world of the play so that truth can live effectively in its own right. And you talk about a truth of the text, and it's a funny thing, really, when you talk about Little Shop of Horrors, and you're talking about, in some ways, a fun, fluffy piece of theater, right? It's not a play that will necessarily change your lives, and that's okay. Though it is a play that can have an effect on your lives for the time that you're in the theater and maybe a little time after, and that often is something that theater goers seek. Sometimes we go to the theater to sit in a darkened space in order to forget or let go of the complexities of our own lives. And this is certainly one of those plays that allows you to do that. There's not a lot of redeeming truth to be discovered in a play about a plant that thrives on blood and flesh and has designs to take over the world. As you know, this play has a very interesting history. It was a low-budget black and white film that really was born out of the fact that there was a movie set that could be used for a couple of days on the cheap. And so in 1960, the movie was born and lives today and has really gotten a tremendous cult following. From that movie, it grew into the musical that Chris so eloquently talked about last time we gathered. And that musical really took the idea of the movie, and for those of you who haven't seen the movie, I really encourage you to try to see it. We're going to see a little bit of it tonight, but I really encourage you to see it because you can see how the musical itself took what was a fun, crazy idea and then used text and music to actually make it a lot more fun and a lot more crazy, and in some ways perhaps a little bit more terrifying. It's hard for us to see a 1960 horror film today and be terrified by it, because we have such high expectations of special effects. And so then, not only then did it become the musical for the theater, then it became a musical, a movie-call, as Chris taught you before. It became a musical on the big screen. And it was tampered with a bit. The musical was tampered with a bit to bring it to the big screen. And in some ways, I think that tampering took away its charm. There's something really special about a play that has a structure, or a musical that has a structure, the limits of what we can do in the theater. And then when you give it all the possibilities of what can be done in film, you raise your expectations, and somehow I personally don't think that the story gets to those expectations. I find it a much more charming musical than I do movie musical. And it's not necessarily because I'm biased towards the theater, but I do think that sometimes our limits allow us to accomplish things that are really terrific. You know, you all engage every time you go to the theater in something we call the willing suspension of disbelief. You know, it's this amazing thing. You come into the theater, and even though you know it's not real, you allow yourselves to believe that it's real, even if it's absolutely could not possibly be real. You allow yourselves to. That's the real, true connection that you have to the live event that's happening on the stage. And somehow in the film, because it comes from a B movie that was almost making fun of itself, the movie musical doesn't do that for you. You know, you're a third person looking in on it. The history of the musical also is very interesting because it went from the regional theater, the WPA theater in New York, to off-Broadway, the Orpheum, and had great success at the Orpheum. Had a very limited run at the WPA, but had a great run off-Broadway. Then, you know, to a national tour, then to the West End in London, where Cameron Mackintosh produced it. And then to Broadway, where it didn't really do much on Broadway. And once again, some plays are not meant to be in big venues, and so lucky for us, because my theater is not a big venue; it's a tiny venue. But and I think it loses some of its possibility by putting it in a really cavernous space. So I do want to also show you a little bit, especially and just by way of context. And the first thing I want to do is I just want you to see a little bit of the opening of the 1960 movie. Do I need to do anything? No, I got it.
Okay. Period in the history of my feet began in a little rundown floor shop called Mushnick's.
Good morning, Mrs. Shiva. How's things today?
Oh, the same as usual, Mr. Mushnick. My sister's dad is darling, in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Oh, what happened?
He got blown up, who knows how.
That's nice. Well, you would like, maybe as usual, some flowers for the funeral.
Oh, but we can't be forgotten and never brought to mind. I thought possibly, because I always give to you all my funeral business, and maybe you should possibly give to me, a little touch, right?
Look on me, Mrs. Shiva. What am I, a philatelist? I sell on Skid Row nothing but cheap carnations. And I should give you a cut rate. I can't even afford water for the flowers. To my throat, I would be giving a cut.
I dress like wells in marble halls with vessels.
Get up from the back! Excuse me, Mrs. Shiva, that's Seymour.
He's a nice boy.
Why don't you let him sing?
What? See? Look, here I got a new customer, brand new in the yellow vest. I should let him clean up, boy, but I can't even afford chase him out right away. Flowers fresh as the springtime, Mushnicks, hello. Oh, hello, Dr. Pop. What can I do for you?
Listen, Mushnick, I haven't got much time. Send me over 2 gladiolas and a fern.
Excellent. That's 2 dozen glass, 1 potted fun.
No, Mushnick. 2 gladiolas and 1 fern.
Come on, you put 2 gladiolas in the pot with the fun.
No, 1 fern, 1 piece. Altogether, 3 pieces. I need it for my waiting room.
What?
Good, I'll drill a bigger hole.
You mean you want 2 crummy gladiolas and 1 crummy fine? What kind of a decoration is that?
This is my flower budget for the week. Mushnick. Who can be a dentist on Skid Row.
All right, excellent. I'll send Seymour right away. Who am I to argue with science?
Make it snappy. Now you are going to get it. Oh, you are going to get it. Look.
Seymour Crabwine? Now, Mrs. Sheila, we were talking to the funeral flowers, but in the little...
Did you call me Mr. Mushnet?
No, I was calling John D. Rockefeller to make a loan on my Rolls Royce.
Sorry I said it.
Now look, Seymour. You take 2 gladiolus, you'll cut them nice and even. You'll take 1 foil, you'll wrap them in a package, and you'll take them to Dr. Fowler. Right? Already! Now what can I do for you, sir?
My name is Percy.
Excellent. I am Gravis Bushley.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, when are we going to get my roses?
I'll take care of you, Mrs. Phillips. Come right over here.
You would like maybe some orchids for a nice girl?
No, I think I'd like to put a dozen carnations.
Carnations.
Person can't find about these days that somebody should drop dead.
You've had more than your share of bad luck, Mrs. Shiver.
Bad luck, she calls. You should have so many people can go. You would have somebody call on top.
What about the carnations?
And one of the roses.
Yes, for Stanley.
Carnations.
You should see what that Seymour is. Oh, here are your carnations. Wait, I'll wrap them for
Well,
you.
that's all right. I'll leave them here.
Why not? Of course, what else? They are all right.
Well, that's
Well, this is a small shop.
that's okay. You know those big places? They're full of pretty flowers, expensive flowers. When you're raising for looks and smell, you're bound to lose some food back. I like these little out-of-the-way places.
Such a thing, needing flowers.
Look, don't knock it till you try it, huh?
The choices that if you watch the whole film, it's an interesting set of choices that the writer and composer made to create the musical. Mrs. Shiva appears in the musical, but not on stage. We hear about Mrs. Shiva. We don't have a carnation-eating customer. We have a dentist of a totally different ilk. And it's really fascinating. You know, I would encourage you to sort of look at the original source material, and you know, that's one of the things that I think is really charming, is that I think that they took what was probably a silly idea and they actually built it in a pretty tremendous way in terms of coming up with this musical. Now, another life that this musical had, albeit brief, was this play about a florist who nurtures a person-eating carnivorous plant that had designs on taking over the world. Actually, for a very brief time, was an animated children's cartoon series. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of that as well.
And I spent 13 years trying to become a nerd. You see, my problem is, I've got everything it takes to be a nerd. Except brains. lunchbox. I always sneak in a bologna sandwich.
And you know that's well born.
Maybe someday I'll get to eat it. Actually, I like school. You see, that's where I first met Audrey Mush.
Are you all right? It looks like you weren't breathing.
She doesn't even know I'm alive.
So somehow Seymour is best friend with his Venus flytrap, and they sort of conquer the world together in this animated version that really only lasted a season. Though John tells me he was a devoted fan when it was on. So one of the things that folks often ask us is, why we choose certain shows that we do, and I think that it always bears repeating. When the faculty and students, we have a committee that chooses the season. We will begin working soon to choose next year's season. It always drives the faculty just crazy that we're not even halfway through the season and we have to start thinking about the next one, but we do. But we are always looking at a 4-year cycle for our students. We want our students who are working in our productions and our students who are in the audience, as well as all of you, to, in a 4-year time, have as much experience with as many genres and styles of theater as we can possibly muster. What's interesting about the musical theater is that it has evolved in such a way that there are so many different types of musicals. And you've been in our audience before, you've seen a great variety of them. And we are always looking to expand that for our musical theater students. And this play, as opposed to Drood from last year, which was a very large cast with audience participation, this particular musical allowed us to build a smaller ensemble that would work more closely together and build characters that have to propel the story forward in a significant way. And it offered us that opportunity, as well as the opportunity, of course, to work with puppets, though it seems like we're doing plays with puppets year after year after year. One of these days, we'll break that cycle. But Little Shop gives us a chance for our students to sing in musical theater a variety of musical styles that they're not going to get in any other title, quite frankly. Whereas last year they were singing in the music hall style, totally. This time they get to sing a little of rhythm and blues, a little doo-wop, a little bit of rock, and so that's very helpful to their development. And also it's truly a fun show to live with for a long time. One of the things too I'll talk very briefly about before I bring Michael up here is Audrey 2. Audrey 2, the plant. We chose this year to rent the puppets as opposed to manufacture them ourselves. Making the Audrey 2s is quite an undertaking. And knowing that we had a major faculty change coming into this year, we decided that was just something we wanted to not have on our plates. So we are actually renting the puppets from Monkey Boy Productions, which is a prop shop in Pennsylvania, and they will be arriving next week. We haven't gotten to live with them yet, but we will be getting next week. We posted photos of the plants on the board as well, and I encourage you to look at them. Audrey has four iterations before the final number. So really, Audrey has essentially five iterations. And you'll meet tonight the folks who will bring the puppet to life. But it's going to be very exciting for us because we're working with a pretty wonderful puppet design that we'll be sharing with you that I think will add a tremendous dimension to our own production. So with that said, I want to welcome Michael Benson and bring Michael up here so he can talk a bit about the world of the play as he's imagined it. So, Michael.
Great, thank you. Welcome, good evening. I'm very excited to be here to be a part of this great department with such wonderful leadership and colleagues. And my wife and I talk often in the evening, not just about anything, but we talk about how very, very fortunate we are to have landed here. So, as this being my first backstage pass, I ask for forgiveness, and I look forward to and thank you for the opportunity. So, the world of the play. So, where are we? Is often one of those first questions, and when are we? Being a scenic designer, there's a certain amount of, I kind of tell the students, you kind of have to have a God complex a little bit. You have to really want to delve into and create a complete and total world. And all of the clues that you need for that world come from, of course, the text, as Greg has mentioned. And then when we have the added bonus of having music behind that, that helps us establish an emotive feel. You know, how do we feel about this music? Well, this is happy, this is kind of upbeat music. And then you have the story underneath and how that all kind of runs. So where we're at is kind of a place where we're dealing in a world that is, where lives are seemingly insignificant in a large, uncaring world. Seymour and Audrey are victims of abuse, both literally and figuratively. And then finally, there's a wonderful juxtaposition that enters in this show, and that's the addition of the plant, where you have kind of this exotic naturalism kind of working within the urban jungle. All right, and this unique element that is unique in both visually in the fact that it doesn't seem like it should appear in a world where we're in, and then unique in the fact that it talks and sings. So that's a wonderful different kind of element that we get to play with. So the world with which Seymour is, and I kind of focused on Seymour as I was beginning this process, where he's kind of a small man. You know, and he kind of gets kicked around. And when he has this opportunity to kind of acquire the things that he wants, you have to kind of understand where he's coming from. And the world begins with then a bit of research on my part. So this first image here kind of spoke to me for a couple different reasons. One, it's kind of dark and looming, and it talks about this city. You know, Seymour is, he works with plants, but you have to wonder whether he has, in fact, ever been outside of the city. The city is tall. It dwarfs him and his problems. He himself doesn't necessarily seem to take a lot of pleasure. And same thing with Audrey. And then finally, but they're compelled to enter, and it is very, very difficult to leave. Okay, there is something tantalizing. It almost draws you in. Very similar to the plant, as it kind of manipulates the actions going through the end of the show. So this image right here, the kind of dirty, grungy look that we have in a back alley in Skid Row, muted colors, nothing's very vibrant, nothing's terribly smooth or inviting, a variety of textures. It's chaotic, it's disorganized, but it's organized in its chaos. So we wanted to bring some of that into the set as well, to give a feeling of this is not necessarily a nice place that you would want to spend more than maybe 2 hours in as an audience member. The plants themselves can have kind of a wonderful color that just has an underlying element of danger, like what's going to happen here? The shape itself and the line, not so soft, not so interesting, but there's something that's going to happen, and it brings an element of tension and kind of makes us anxious to introduce that into this kind of world. So this is an idea of kind of the research I kind of go with. I base on how I feel about the script, conversations with Greg, the rest of the design team, and it's a fun process for me because I get to look at other art and I get to think about my own and how that works. So the design itself begins early on with a sketch. And being new to the Mary Washington, it's unique. Every space has its own quirks, which you learn over time. And of course, coming new to the Klein Theater, which is a beautiful space and very intimate, right in my wheelhouse of places I want to work. It does come with its own set of quirks. And so working with Kenny and Julie and the other faculty, it's been an interesting time to kind of learn these quirks and kind of move on. So things have changed, things have kind of shifted. But it starts, everything starts with a sketch. Okay, my process begins with a pencil and a paper. And the same thing that scenic designers have been using for decades. Okay, but I kind of take things a little differently. So I work out the sketch on paper and I make sure that it has elements of good design. And then the next tool I use is I work with three-dimensional modeling. And John, if you could just kind of show how that kind of will work. You can build the set inside of the computer, and from there it allows you a certain different vantage point, and it allows you to become very, very intimate with the theater and the set itself. And then it allows you to play with things like color and texture, what works well together. And it becomes a living space inside of the computer. Some people, there's a learning curve to this, to be sure. I've always been kind of drawn to this, and I think it helps augment both the communication of the design to the other artists working on the show, in addition to the technical staff. It doesn't quite, it also lends itself to a couple of other things. One, the traditional way that scenic designers have always kind of communicated the space is with a model, a scenic model. And this year we were kind of fortunate, or I've been fortunate enough, to work with both my student assistant, Claire Crusat, and then also the team over at the Simpson Library Think Lab who have joined us here this evening. Shannon, Aaron, and a guy I know just because, I'm sorry your name escapes me, but you have the best hat in the world. But they have been very, very gracious in working with us because we were able to 3D print the model in scale, having been able to bring in the computer, building it into the computer model using a program called Vectorworks, which interfaces very, very easily and very, very wonderfully with some stage lighting software such as Lightright. So they were great and excited to work with this as well. We introduced some other elements, some more traditional elements into the model, as you can see. You're still working with acrylic paints and paintbrushes and X-Acto knives and having a grand old time with that. But I think it's adding the technology to something that has been traditionally, very, very hands-on, and still very, very hands-on, adds a different element, and it increases what we're able to communicate and how effectively communicate. It doesn't help the design. The design still starts with just a pencil. It starts with just an idea and learning the show and talking with your colleagues. And all the technology, again, it just helps kind of communicate it. But that's kind of where we've wound up, with what we've had here in the model, a world that kind of overpowers the shop and what's going on in it. And then as the plant kind of grows throughout the course of the play, Seymour keeps getting pushed out a little bit more and more until we kind of have to wonder where our underlying motives with this particular piece of flora. So that's kind of where we've wound up with the design, and I've been very, very, again, very, very grateful to Greg and the rest of the faculty and the students for allowing me this opportunity. And thank you very much for coming out.
So here we go. Let's hope that Kevin is sending me some really good vibes here. I will talk a little bit about the costumes for Little Shop of Horrors. As you probably know by now, we design and build everything for every show within reason. Certainly there are things that can be shopped or pulled from our stock. We do that just as a cost and time-saving measure. But for the most part, we take great pride in the fact that we produce these shows as our own productions. And that certainly is true in the costume shop that does pretty extraordinary work. If you visit, when we have the open shops and you visit the costume shop, what you should know is that Kevin designs the costumes. Those are the pretty pictures that are on the wall that I'm going to also project here. And once they're designed, they get draped. What that means is that the costume shop supervisor then puts muslin onto a dress form and drapes it so that it flows correctly. And then from the draping, the costume shop builds patterns. These are not patterns out of a fabric store book. These are patterns that are drawn and drafted for the actors' bodies. Then the costumes get built in muslin first. They get built in muslin and fitted to the actors, and once all the kinks are worked out and they fit to the actors, then they're transferred into the fabrics for the show. And so it is a lengthy and time-consuming process that yields pretty extraordinary results for us. And our actors are pretty lucky to be working with clothing. Actors wear costumes, characters wear clothing. they're lucky to be working with things that are built specifically for them, and with a designer who helps them to wear those clothes appropriately as the character. There are a couple of different worlds in Little Shop. As Michael presented, we have the world of the shop, we have the world external to the shop. And the shop itself transforms. Once Audrey starts to grow and bring in business, the business gets better, and the world actually changes. The world as it's introduced to us with Mushnik, the owner, and Seymour, his employee, is a largely sort of brown and tired world. And so what we will see in those characters, Kevin's reflected in them the fact that the world itself does not have very much color. And so Seymour here, as depicted, Seymour as we meet him, and Seymour as he gets a little bit more successful as Audrey grows. But the color in the shop is actually Audrey, who is employed by the shop as the employee. So the only color you're going to see in the shop early on is really brought to the shop by Audrey, who of course is the love interest, who is the person that Seymour names the plant after, who brings life into the world. Audrey has a tremendous number of costumes because Audrey loves fashion and she loves wearing clothes. She even talks about her clothes in the text, which gives the costume designer, clues about what it is she's going to wear. She also has a sling. I'm not going to give you the spoiler, but the sling isn't like any sling you're going to get at Mary Washington Hospital. I guarantee that. More Audrey clothes, including the nightgown that we see her at the end of her life. But she brings a lot of color to the world, and it very specifically chosen by Kevin, the costume designer. What's interesting too about the designs, the work of a costume designer thinks about fabrics and the like. The costume designer designs the costumes and then goes and seeks the fabrics. It's always amazing to me that Kevin designs the costumes and then he actually goes and finds the fabrics that match the designs. And that's how it works. And sometimes he knows that he can source a piece of fabric. In this particular show, there was a piece of fabric that he had sourced, but there wasn't enough of it, and so we had to change the value of the color. But it's always amazing to me how the clothes actually end up looking like what he designed, even though the fabric is miles away when he's in his studio painting the renderings. We have the trio, the urchins, the street urchins in the show, and the street urchins are very, very important. They have a classical device in Little Shop, very smartly written. They are all-knowing. They are the storytellers. They know more than the characters know at any moment. And they are constantly on stage commenting about the action, foretelling the future, and also instigating action so the play moves forward. The urchins too have a number of different iterations in terms of what they wear throughout the show. But when we first meet them, they're just young women who live in the neighborhood. And then they get a number of costumes. The costumes for the urchins themselves are riffed off of the girl groups of the 60s. And that's the inspiration that Kevin has for them. So they have a number of costume changes. Four costume changes as well. And their costumes move along the story in a pretty interesting way. But they also bring a tremendous amount of color, even though they are not but once in the world of the play, the shop itself. They are the external world, exterior to the shop. And finally, and this will make more sense when you see it, at the end of the play, when they are agents of propagating the plant for the world, They have gowns that Kevin has designed that are ripped off of the plant itself. So when you go and see the puppet renderings, actually the puppet photos on the board, you'll see how the green, the leaves, also the warts of the plant are rendered here in these gowns themselves, with great opera gloves as well. But all of their dresses are ripped off of the girl groups, even at this end. Sometimes if you see this play at other places, the urchins become sort of lab technicians. But we built it now. We built it up just a bit. Mr. Bushnick, who owns the floral shop, we see a small change in him. He's pretty much down in the dumps at the start of the play until Audrey 2 starts bringing him lots of cash and lots of business, and then he dresses up a bit more because he has more money. And the dentist of another variety. So we have a dentist who is a significant agent in the play, a dentist who loves being a dentist for all the reasons many of us hate going to the dentist. And he also is in a relationship with Audrey. So he's a dentist who's a biker. And so, not surprisingly, we see him here in a biker jacket and jeans. And his dentist jacket, as you can see, is sketched at the top. Now, one of the things, we're just showing you this because one of the things that you probably don't even realize, but for a number of years, the past several years, our costume shop has been using very new embroidery technology to accessorize our costumes. And through a pretty, it's really tremendous to see in action. Our designer, Kevin, he renders designs that then get digitized into a Bernina machine, embroidery machine, and then those designs are actually sewn onto the fabric that is used. Dr. Benita McCall, who's actually one of our participants here in the back, I know you don't like me pointing this out, but Dr. McCall is a national expert on this technique and teaches all over the country this technique, and we're lucky because she's introduced us to our costume shop, and we make tremendous use of it. So this is actually Orange Scribello's logo that is on his dental jacket. And so Kevin has designed it, it's been digitized, and Dr. McCall will actually sew it onto the fabric where it's needed. His nurses' assistants, his dental assistants will also have a rendering of this logo on their uniform as well. But it's really quite fascinating. And Kevin, I'll just talk a little bit about him. Kevin's kind of leading the way in the theater for this technology and has great interest in Bernina, the sewing machine manufacturer, in his work. Because he has really introduced us in the theater in a way that other people have never used it. And so we're really thrilled that we're contributing to the field in this way, and largely through Dr. McCall, who has great stories to tell of how many times she has to do a sample in red because there's so many reds, and Kevin will say, no, not that one, not that one. And so hours later, she renders it in a different red until he's satisfied. And then we have a variety of characters who are also played by the dentist once the dentist dies, and it's a conceit of the show. It was a conceit of the show largely because small cast shows are cheaper to produce, and so once the dentist died, it was cheaper for them to just have the dentist play all of the other characters. Sometimes folks cast these as separate actors, but we're keeping with the conceit of the show. So our dentist will be seen in a variety of other guises before the end of the play. Actually, in just one number. So with that said, I'm sorry, Kevin, wherever you are. I know that I have not done you justice. But hopefully he'll be around when you visit the shops, and you can talk with him if all goes well. You can certainly look at the renderings over there. His assistant is Jasmine Andrews. I don't see Jasmine here tonight. I think they're all in the costume shop sewing, trying to get ahead of things while Kevin's away. With that said, I'd love to introduce the other folks who make this possible. So if the actors and stage managers would come forward, we'd love to have them introduce themselves. Okay, so I'd love for the actors to introduce themselves to you.
Hello, my name is Javon Jones. I am a sophomore here at UMW, and I'm going to be majoring in music and theater. I will be manipulating the puppet for Audrey 2 in this production. So, yeah. I'm from Mechanicsville, Virginia, and yeah.
Hello, my name is William Pineda, and I come from Springfield, Virginia. I'm undeclared right now, but wink wink, I'm gonna go to theater. And in this show, I am Mr. Mushnik, and I'm also a freshman.
Hello, my name is Abraham Sheikh. I'm a junior, and I'm a theater and political science major at UMW. I play Seymour Crowborn, and I am a local. I'm from Stafford, Virginia, so yeah.
I'm Diana Bloom. I'm a freshman. I'm going to be majoring in theater and biology. I'm playing Ronette. She's one of the urchin girls, and I'm from Fredericksburg.
I'm Olivia Wichlow. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm a junior theater major. I am playing Chiffon, another one of the urchin girls.
I'm Lauren Crouchy. I'm a senior theater major. I'm from Herndon, Virginia, and I'm playing Crystal, another one of the urchins.
Hi, my name is Rachel Williamson. I am a sophomore theater major, and I will be playing Audrey. What else did I not say? Where are you from? I'm from Richmond.
Hi, my name is Alexander Rios. I'm a senior theater major, musical theater minor. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but I live in Columbia, South America, and I'm playing the dentist.
Hi, my name is Mason White. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a freshman here at UMW. I will be an English major, and I am planning to apply to the College of Education, and I am the voice of Audrey 2.
Hi, I'm Melissa Davis. I'm from King George, Virginia. I'm a transfer student from Randolph-Macon College, and this is my actually second semester freshman year. I'll be in the ensemble. I think that's all.
Hi, I'm Jackson Miles. I'm from Manassas, Virginia. I'm a sophomore music and theater double major with a musical theater minor. Yeah. And I'll be also ensemble in the show. Oh, yeah, that's it.
We'd also like to acknowledge our stage management team.
Hello, I'm Sam Rollin. I'm a senior theater major. I'm from Arlington, Virginia, and I'm the stage manager for Little Shop of Horrors.
Hello, I'm Grace Weaver. I'm a sophomore theater major. I am the first assistant stage manager at Fairfax, Virginia.
I'm Jessica Hagee. I'm from Warrenton, Virginia. I'm a junior theater major, and I'm second assistant stage manager.
I'm Lydia Bensky. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia. I am a freshman. I want to major in theater, and I'm the PA.
So one of the things that folks often ask us about is rehearsal hours. Of course, we're in the rehearsal room a lot. Nobody's in the rehearsal room more than the stage managers. Stage managers arrive before any of us arrive. They go home long after we leave, and they do tremendous work on our behalf. We have a significant stage management program here with very successful graduates. It's run by Brandon Prendergast, who is a professional stage manager in Washington, and so they get really great experience while they're here, and we're so fortunate to have them. This tape is their handiwork. They make it all happen for us. So thank you to our stage managers. So before we open up to questions, we have a little bit of a treat for you. We're going to sing for you Skid Row, one of the early numbers in Little Shop, just to give you a taste of what's to come. Great, we can take a couple of questions before we head out. If anybody has any questions of the actors, Michael, me, Kevin, we can email you the answers. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Frank, not so much a question, just a point of information. we're talking about people seeing the original 1960 version. It is available in its full run on YouTube and on Amazon Prime if anybody wants to see it.
Oh, terrific. That's very good news. Yeah. Yeah, I would encourage you to watch it. It does add some understanding to the music. Other questions? Yes.
How long have you guys actually been working? Like, when did you all audition and start building the lines and all that?
So auditions for the musical were the very first week of classes, which was the end of August, beginning of September. They immediately went into music rehearsals for the 3 weeks we were in rehearsal for Vanya and Sonia and Russian Spite. And then as soon as that opened, I came into rehearsal and we began staging. And so they've been working pretty significantly since September. So first it's music, then we do staging, and then they've done choreography since then. It is a very long process, just the way that we do it here. We just don't have enough hours in the day to get it all done unless we take that many weeks. So they've been working at it, for the whole semester, essentially. Yes?
Do rehearsals ever conflict with other classes?
Sometimes they do, and we let them come late. There's a point at which that they have to arrange with their professors not to miss an evening class. Increasingly, we have a lot of evening classes on campus. Our actors soon learn that they have a better chance of being cast with fewer conflicts like that. So our actors tend not to take an evening class unless they're absolutely desperate their senior year, as Alexander is. Other questions?
You showed how his costumes changed, where Audrey becomes more prominent. Did Michael change the scenery of the shop?
Yes, the shop changes significantly, and you'll see that in the theater significantly. As Audrey grows and becomes successful, the shop becomes more successful, and we will actually see that. So that's dressing on top of the structure in the world that he's already designed for us. Yes.
When do you start building the set?
It's already being built. It started when Vanya we began. There were some things we built, so we've been building since then.
Yeah, we have to. We open the first show 3 weeks after school begins, and we actually are now in a process where we build a significant amount of that first show over the summer, just so we can then begin the build for the musical earlier. It's a smaller cast musical, but there are no small musicals, as Kevin always tells me. So it takes a lot of time. And we have a very small. If you tour our shops, you see we have very small spaces, and so we can't really build two things at once. We have no place to build or store the scenery. So yeah, they've been building like crazy. Yes.
Is the first play of the season then cast previous spring, or is it cast in the summer?
It's a really great question, and it was different this year. We have always cast the first play with the musical together the first week of classes. And the faculty made a decision last spring to try casting the first play of the season in the spring so that students come back better prepared and we can accelerate that process. And that's what we did this year. And I think is likely to stick because it was a richer experience for the students who were involved, having more time. When they have 3 weeks to opening, they can barely get their lines learned, much less do all of the other acting work. The acting work doesn't begin until the lines are learned. So the first time in many, many years, we actually had 2 actors who were in the first show, Olivia and Lauren. Raise your hands. So they were actually in the first show and came as soon as Vanya opened, then they became half-time with this show. And then full-time when it closed. So they've had a lot of catching up to do because of it. But we didn't want to, it's challenging, we didn't want them to have to choose last spring. We don't want any of our students to have to choose, well, if I audition and get cast in one show, then I'm not going to be able to be in the musical. We didn't want to do that. And it's worked. I mean, They're almost there. Yes.
In your four-year cycle, can we expect to see another Shakespearean play in like the next 3 years?
You can. We tend to do a Shakespeare at least every other year. We do a lot of Shakespeare when we look at classical theater, and the reason is that in terms of theaters in this country, theaters that are both, when you just look at regional theaters like Arena Stage, there are a growing number, in fact, a huge number that exist of theaters devoted to classical literature, like the Shakespeare Theater in Washington. So our students need to become adept at the classical literature, and Shakespeare especially. So we always favor Shakespeare in terms of consideration. It's difficult, though, for us. We're in the business of doing shows that give students opportunities. Shakespeare plays have a lot more roles for men. And so that's always challenging for us because we actually have a casting pool like lots of university theaters that has a lot more women. And so that's one of the things, we're trying to find the right Shakespeare play to do. Yes?
On top of 2 plays, how many hours are you taking? You do.
I'm in 15 credits.
I'm in 13 credits.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating about that to me, for the most part, with few exceptions, I'm not even going to look at any of the students. Our students do very well academically. They have to do very well because they have to manage their time appropriately. They have to go to class, they have to get their studying done, they have to get their work done, they have to go to rehearsal. And even during the day, if you're having evening rehearsals here, they're called for costume fittings during the day or vocal sessions during the day. So they may have 2 hours devoted during the day to the show that's not rehearsal. And so what we learn, our students learn very early on that the key to being successful in life is time management, right? And they get a good dose of it. So our students tend to do very well because they learn it early on that they've got to do it. We want them to be successful in school. It doesn't help us if they fail out of school, because we've invested in the student and trained them and then they're gone, and it doesn't help them. So I'm always in awe of how much time they devote to our work. I know because I'm here. I know how much time I devote to it. But students who have very complicated, busy lives, their lives are much more complicated than my life was as a college student. Much more complicated, and for better or worse, that's the reality. And so I'm always grateful that they devote the time that they do to our work and to themselves, really. Any other questions? Yes?
On the same sort of lines, do they sometimes get credit for media to act?
They always get credit. Yeah, they always get credit. They get 1 credit. In terms of time, the time that a credit is actually worth 45 hours of time, right? So theoretically, when you're in a 3-credit class, you're spending 135 hours between class time and preparing for class, right? We can't give more than 1 credit because pretty soon their whole college career would be nothing but theater credits, and that's not what we're in the business of doing. So they get 1 credit, which is kind of it's a bonus, but they can use up to 8 of those credits towards graduation, and that's not insignificant. And many of our students will get an A for that credit because they love doing it and they want to do well, and so that's 8 credits of A's if they do the work. And so that's significant. Now, some of our students are doing senior projects. Somebody asked about that a couple of weeks ago. All of our seniors have to do a senior project. That is a senior capstone project that they have to propose to the faculty to do that is some sort of end experience to their college career. And they can propose, actors can propose a role on the main stage season. They can propose the role, but they also have to be cast in the role. So they can propose a role, but they may not get the role. But if they are cast in a main stage show, then they use that role for their senior project. The senior project gets 3 credits, but they have a pretty significant research demand on top of that. And they also have to sit for a jury of the faculty at the end. And so Alexander is doing his role as his senior project, and Sam Rollin is doing stage management as her senior project. So they actually get a little bit more credit. It's certainly not compensation for the time, but you know, that's how life is. I say that's just the way it goes. Yes?
Are there classes in theater that go on in the summer here, when you're studio views year-round, or?
No, we tend not to teach in the summer, and you know, I'll tell you why we don't teach in the summer. One, the faculty needs to go out and do their own thing in the summer, and so it's very hard for us to be present in the summer. Also, the faculty need a break from each other in the summer. We kind of don't want to see each other in the summer. We love each other, but we're done by May. You know, we're done looking at each other. But from time to time, we do workshops. We do professional voice workshops in the summer. We've done professional stage combat workshops in the summer. We don't use Wonder Bread because if you think it's warm right now, just imagine. You know, John surprised me last summer because he actually hand painted these logos on the walls for us. Last summer in July. Like I don't know how he did it, but it's very, very warm in here. So remember, HVAC company, large donation for air conditioning. We'll teach a lot in the summer. We love this space. Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're going to be here. You can talk to folks later than